Here is a country of great contrast.
Great civilization of antiquity.
A foreign country a step away.
We're back. We're back. It's the Casa de Cavazos. Justin in Chicago, Nathan in Westco, Texas, Ada in Harlingen, Texas, providing that Tejano connection to reality. It is Sunday, March 9th. How's it going? What's up? Did you catch any of that sweet, sweet NBA action this weekend?
Yeah, I enjoyed the Lakers-Celtics game last night. Anytime LeBron loses, that's great for me.
You're like evil, man. You hate him. Like if he gets hurt, you're like, fuck yeah.
No,
I think
I
she
didn't
was
do
celebrating
that.
the groin injury.
No, I just said he's old. What do you expect? I mean, remember what happened to me last year?
Are you comparing yourself to LeBron?
In some ways, yes. Remember what happened to me last year? Like just a terrible groin tear the day before the Super Bowl. I had to order crutches from Walmart Plus. I was having
but this
extremely
man-
sharp pains.
Yeah, but this man spends millions on his body. Like, you do nothing.
Yeah.
I didn't. I did do something. I ran 8 miles. At the end, I'm like, oh, it's kind of sore. Okay. And then once it cooled down, it's like, oh my God, sharp pain, can barely walk.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And then she still went to do the half marathon. It was horrible.
Yeah.
She could barely walk, and she's like, oh, I'm probably not going to do it. And then I don't know what she did. She felt well enough to do it. And then she said she felt horrible during the whole run.
Did she fly to Germany?
What happened was I was having extreme sharp pains. Like I could barely even roll around in bed. But I did a lot of my own rehab, just like jumping jacks, body weight squats, tons of different stretches. And I like tried to figure out how to run in a different way because I literally couldn't like plant my foot properly. Like my foot wouldn't pop up or plant properly. So yeah, I just had to learn a different way of running, and I did a lot of rehab myself. And yeah, it happened. The half marathon happened, and it took me many, many months to fully recover.
Yeah, I feel like we've dedicated way too much time on your ailments here. So back to the NBA. What were your takeaways from the Lakers-Celtics game yesterday?
I think my first takeaway was that with about 7 minutes left in the first quarter, LeBron already looked gassed. So I thought that was a bad sign for them, even though they were playing pretty well versus the Celtics. The fact that he was already gassed is a bad sign. I thought that initially the Celtics were kind of playing tight, kind of playing nervous. But once they settled down, it was clear that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown could pretty much do whatever they wanted offensively.
I don't think they were nervous. I think it's just the way the Lakers play now. I don't think they were ready for that physicality, and took them a little bit to get used to it. But and talking about LeBron, Luka was also pretty gassed too. They keep praising them on ESPN and all the networks. Like they play with all this effort, but you see what happens when they play against a good team. And once that effort isn't getting rewarded with stops, they just check out for a bit. I mean, they made a decent comeback at the end, but it took a lot out of them. I mean, I don't know if they would have finished it with LeBron, but it was kind of telling, like, that's what's going to happen in the playoffs. Like, they're going to have to play balls to the wall for the entire game. And I don't know, with LeBron being 40 and Luka already having the history that he's had, I mean, he was wincing with his back yesterday.
Yeah. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak.
Yeah, I totally understand that. Also, I didn't understand what the Celtics were doing defensively initially. I felt like they were doubling way too much, and they probably shouldn't have been doubling at all. They were doubling, I think, mostly Luka, and then he would just find someone for an open three. I thought that was a terrible strategy.
I mean, the Lakers aren't that good at three, so I mean, it wasn't a bad strategy. The Lakers just came out on fire yesterday.
I think the Celtics are so good, so many like big guys, so many good defenders. You just play straight up.
It looks like that third quarter is where it all fell apart for the Lakers, because they shot 21% from the field in the third quarter and also committed 6 turnovers. So that all turned around for them. Not to mention the whole injury to LeBron when he was actually on his way to a triple-double. Maybe he was inspired by Jokic.
Oh, by the first ever 30-20-20 game in NBA history.
I can't believe that hasn't happened before. Like, I know it's like a ridiculous stat line, but
Well, I was asleep when that game was on, but like I got woken up and it was like, oh, NBA history has been made. And I was like, wait, what are you talking about?
wait, who woke you up?
The ESPN broadcast.
It's like Kendrick
then they were-
Perkins or like Scott Van Pelt. Just, hey, Nathan.
No, the game was still going. I was able to catch a few minutes of the OT, but that's what they were talking about. Like, it was I guess Durant made some crazy shot to even force OT, and they're like, that's the only reason the 30-20-20 even happened.
And we've all known about Jokic's just statistical anomaly type games, which is crazy for how much he thinks about the NBA as a job and not a passion, and he's still dominating. Imagine how much Jokic would be kicking everyone's ass if he loved basketball.
I think he does love it. He's more excited about other things. You can tell he works on his craft all the time.
Yeah, well, it's that European mindset. You work to live. You don't live to work.
Yeah. Did y'all happen to catch the OKC Denver game today?
I caught some of it.
I did not. I was working. I was in the
Yeah,
theater.
SGA was playing really well.
Well, yeah, that's why they're talking about maybe this should be the first time you have co-MVPs. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, I think Shea's just going to get it because, I mean, they're really killing everybody. Their point differential is pretty good. Indicates that they should be a contender, which I don't know why people are still writing them off. I feel it's just like, oh, well, they haven't been out of the second round. I'm like, yeah, that happens when you're a young team, but I think I've said this before on this pod. I think they're ready. I think they've turned that corner. I think Shea's ready. Chet's playing again, since you asked, Justin. Yeah, he played today as well.
Nice.
It was a pretty good game for the most part, and then at the very end, OKC just took over, which is what usually happens when you watch their games. I mean, you can hang with them for a bit, but with how deep they are, they eventually just overwhelm you.
I don't know how they got all those guys. Hartenstein, Caruso. It's like a really solid bench guys in addition to these killer starters. I mean, Jalen Williams.
OKC has always been able to put together really good rosters. And then the second they find their stars, you've seen what happens.
Who is saying that they're not ready?
Some people on ESPN are saying it. There's been a couple of other articles I've read on The Athletic. They're kind of like weary, like, oh. And there's still Kendrick Perkins, of course, saying like, oh, if the Lakers get him, they'll take him. And I'm like...
Also, Nick
They're not
Wright
gonna
already
take
called
him.
it for the Lakers. Nick Wright said that Lakers are going to win the title.
What?
Nick Wright is a big LeBron fan. I mean, I don't think he watches OKC at all. I mean, they're solid all the way up and down. I think they could probably play like a legit 9-10 against every team. Like, they wouldn't have to shorten the rotation against anybody. The Lakers definitely cannot say that.
Yeah, and OKC shouldn't be scared of a 40-year-old LeBron. Like, you should be able to beat him and play them straight up. Don't give them a bunch of open threes.
I was watching a video where Charles Barkley was talking shit about all the ESPN coverage of the Lakers, and especially what Kendrick Perkins was saying. I'm just so curious how Chuck will be under Disney ESPN, because he has been actively antagonizing them as a network in terms of their Lakers and Warriors coverage, even when those teams haven't been that good, and kind of discounting teams like your Clevelands and your Oklahoma Cities. You think they'll get mad, the executives? I mean, like, he was saying the same thing for the people who program games for TNT.
Yeah, so it's not going to change. He's already had that. I mean, they've talked crap about some of the games they put on. They're like, man, why are we having the Lakers on again? They stink.
He's even making fun of the coverage. He was like, why did they show that play so many times? LeBron got shown like 20 times. Like, there's nothing special about that play.
Yeah, because they actually watch it as former professionals. Like, show the rest of the league. Like, why do you keep showing this one guy? Like, the league's evolved. We don't need to be saved by one guy.
So what was interesting about that third quarter in the game last night was how easy it looked for the Celtics in the third quarter. I mean, it looked like no resistance from the Lakers. It just looked like they could just do whatever they wanted, and they got like a 20-point lead. So once things really came together, and once, I guess, LeBron and Luka tired out, the Celtics had a really easy time with the Lakers.
I don't even know if it's as much about them getting tired out. I think Joe Mazzulla has grown a lot as a coach, and he probably made some adjustments there. Plus, this was the first time that Drew Holiday was back in 4 games, and his defensive presence is definitely felt.
Yeah, they really made Luka struggle. I know his stat line ended up being pretty good, but I mean, he struggled for so long. He had to work so hard for it. I mean, maybe he was not going to be able to take him over the top anyway. It was so much work. I love how like Jaylen Brown kind of still took a shot at him. He's like, I love him on that side of the ball. He's one of my favorite players on that side.
That's funny.
I want to pull up the stats for this game.
And the other thing is, for the Celtics, like, Porzingis still didn't even play. He's been out with an illness for I think already 5 or 7 games. So I don't know what's going on with that.
So Horford is still like their main big right now?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at Twitter. I mean, X during the game, people were saying like, man, it's kind of scary that the Celtics were able to play like this anyway because they say that a lot of the open threes the Lakers were getting anyway would have been like shut down by Porzingis. I guess that's the kind of impact he has on their defense when he's out there.
I mean, Horford's still a really good defender in the center, and even on the perimeter, he was making an impact on Luka.
Well, yeah, he does a lot better than Zubac for the Clippers because I mean, when they played, I mean, Luka and LeBron. I've seen this for a while. You've seen LeBron; he's able to like kind of just rock those bigs to sleep and take threes, and him and Luka would do that to Zubac and actually make it. But Horford was able to be a little bit more connected, and it actually made a difference.
I love Al Horford. Like he's 38 years old, and he still has that drive where he's doing these diving for the ball plays that a much younger player would do. He plays with a ton of effort. Very smart, overall good guy. I also have a soft spot for him because when I used to play NBA 2K, I did one of those like my player careers, and it was around one of those times when they were doing that storyline thing where they pick like someone on your team who was like antagonizing you, who was like the villain, and then someone who was kind of like your mentor who was super nice. And my player got drafted to the Hawks, and Al Horford was always like, "Hey, don't worry about it. You're doing great." I was like, "Oh, thanks, Al Horford."
And yet you don't play 2K anymore. Terrible.
A bunch of other video games to play. I'm in the middle of a Baldur's Gate 3 right now. I feel like the last time I mentioned video games on the pod, I was also playing Baldur's Gate 3. I've been playing that for like over 100 hours. I'm still not done.
Well, like I said, get a PS5 because I just started Dark Souls on there.
Ooh.
Or maybe she'll tell Ada to buy you a PS5 instead of a phone.
Well, I mean, is he going to want the phone or the PS5? He can't have all the things. No? What the heck? Just start adding more things like a phone, a PS5, boots.
I mean, nobody else is going to make you a studio for that price. So,
I mean, is that the payment? Just buying those things? Okay.
We'll talk about it later. I mean, like acoustic engineering, it's like a huge field. Like they'll like hire actual scientists, acousticians, and material scientists who calculate things like the absorption coefficients of this type of drywall. And if you want this kind of sound isolated space, you need to have the drywall in a layer, and then your brackets, and then like a space of air, and then insulation, and then the other side of the drywall when you get to the other wall. And that piece of air is very important for the sound isolation. I was hearing an acoustician talk about how when they would build out these plans for like privacy so that sound wouldn't bleed between the walls, they had this very specific plan to keep that air gap in between the walls. But then they finish building it, and they go in, and they're like, I can still hear from the other side of the room. Turns out a lot of contractors will just like throw garbage, like from like lunch or whatever, into the walls. And that happens like super regularly to the point where it connected both walls so the vibrations could still travel through. That's why the air gap is there. So then they tell the contractors, like, you got to tear up the wall and do it again. We're not going to pay you more because we were very explicit about this.
Are we going to provide some context to this conversation? Well, the fact that Justin and his business partner are going to come and create a very amazing pod room for us.
We're going to do what we can in 2 days.
Yeah.
Which I will never be in.
What? You're supposed to be in the room at times, certain times, maybe once a week or so.
Okay. Are we going to do a pod in there before they leave?
Good.
I don't know, because I don't know how much time they have, because they only have
2
like
days, 2 whole days.
2 whole days of actually working on it.
And that includes cleaning the room?
No. That's two whole other days because that room is literally full of garbage.
Well, during spring break, I'm going to work on the website. I'm going to work on the garage. I'm going to work on the room. So make some progress there. I'm going to work on my novel. I was about to say that. I was literally about to say that.
Were you?
No.
Yes, I was.
How about we get to the mailbag?
Okay.
We're done talking about the Celtics. We're done talking about the Lakers. We're done talking about NBA basketball. Oh, man. Cavs Bucks is on right now on ESPN.
We could watch it on our phones.
No, you cannot.
Too distracting.
Oh, man.
So we actually have another question from the mailbag. This one is from Carlos in Westlake, Texas. Carlos says, so Popovich isn't coming back. The interim coach isn't doing good. How about offering CP3 the position in a year or two? What are your thoughts? My first thought is, okay, Popovich isn't retiring right now, but he's not coming back for the rest of the season.
I also don't know how much longer CP3 plans to play, though. I mean, he hasn't said anything about retirement from what I've heard.
I do remember that there was this kind of idea that when Chris Paul signed, many people were asking him if he wanted to be a mentor / coach on the court kind of guy and potentially coaching in the future. And he said he wasn't interested in that. But I wonder if that was more smoke just because he wanted to focus on playing basketball.
Well, he's 39. Yeah. He'll be 40 in May. So you would think that he's going to be thinking about retiring fairly soon.
He seems to be still going strong, though.
As far as what, assists? His points have really dropped off, right, in the last, 3 or 4 years.
Of not getting hurt.
Oh, that's right. I mean, a lot of those runs where they looked like he'd finally win a title, he ended up suffering some injuries that really hurt them.
Yeah, I don't remember which telecast it was, but I remember Doris Burke saying, Chris Paul, this is a guy who loves basketball. He's made a lot of money playing the sport. He really doesn't need to be doing this anymore with this level of passion and intensity, but you can tell that he loves the game.
I mean, maybe it just depends on how... I mean, if he plays next year, if Wemby is able to return, I mean, it looks like they really like playing together, so I could see a situation where he finally feels he can't do it anymore and he grows to really like Wembanyama, that he'd be like, you know what, I want to stick around, maybe start off as an assistant.
Yeah, I think long-term Popovich really shouldn't continue to coach. I don't know that his health can really stand it, so I'm not sure that he's going to be a full-time coach going forward.
So what's the problem with the interim coach right now? What are his weaknesses? Mike Johnson.
I don't think there's really a problem. I just think you lost Wembanyama. It's really hard to make up for that much size, the defense that he brings. I think any team would struggle. I mean, I think we're going to see the Lakers struggle a little bit here losing LeBron. It's kind of like the same thing with Spurs losing Wembanyama. The coach is really not going to be able to cover up for that.
I mean, if CP3 really loves basketball to the point that he'll do it for like little money or when he doesn't even need money, maybe he is the type that eventually once he realizes it's going to be over, he'll be like, wait, I do want to stay in an organization because that way I can still stay in that same kind of system, still do the travel, still do the working out, still be involved in the games. So maybe at the end of the day, maybe he will decide to coach just because he just wants to stay in basketball.
Yeah, and then like I said, maybe it won't be a year or two that they offer him the position. Maybe he's going to take a couple of years off to be with his family and stuff. I think Chauncey Billups took a while before he actually coached anyway.
Redick too. Redick took some time to do that pod for a while. Kid didn't go into coaching immediately, right?
No, I don't think he did. It was a little bit. I think these players need a little bit of a break. Like, they don't want to go right back into coaching. Like, they've played all this time. They want to enjoy their time for a little bit, and then they'll decide within a couple of years, you know what, I do miss the game. I miss being around it. And then they'll try to come in.
What kind of coach do you think CP3 would be?
CP3, like compared to a current coach? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, you can tell he really knows the game. I mean, just what really impressed me with him was that year that he went to OKC and everybody was like, oh, they were going to be really bad. And they ended up going to the playoffs. Actually, I think they took the Rockets to 7 games that year. It's pretty close to beating them too. So, I mean, I just don't know what his strategy would be, though. It's
maybe like Kid.
No, Kid is very hard on the players. I think Aid is the one that was saying that the old when he was on Milwaukee, like he was very hard on the players.
That was from the Giannis book.
Yeah, but I think Aid had already told me before too, because I think there was a broadcast when one of the years in the playoffs, and he was like, "You guys just gonna have to push through it. Like it's gonna hurt." And, like all the players looked really exhausted.
But I don't know. Like, isn't CP3 kind of known for being harder than his teammates? There's this kind of narrative that he ends up rubbing people the wrong way over time, and that's kind of the narrative around why Lob City kind of fell apart later.
I mean, I think if you want to build a champion, you want someone like that. Eventually, the players who aren't willing to work will just kind of filter out, and you can keep the players that, like the Jimmy Butlers, those kinds of players, the Steph Currys.
Yeah, if that narrative was out there, like I said, the OKC season really took that away. Like I was like, no, like has to be a really good leader. And obviously, he was a great example, like, because no expert even had them close to the playoffs that year. And they could have, like, conceivably gone to the second round. So, I mean, if that narrative was out there, I don't buy it.
So, the Spurs are 26-35. They are 4 games outside of the play-in. They are 3-7 in their last 10. In terms of the league, they're about the middle of the pack for offensive points per game, and they're in the middle of the pack, starting to be towards the bottom defensively in points per game. So they're kind of average.
I mean, it was going to take time anyway for the team to become like a championship level team. So technically, Wemby being gone for the rest of the season didn't really change their time frame. So as long as he can come back, I think they'll continue to get better. De'Aaron Fox will continue to play well with him, and the other players will continue to get better. So I think they're still on the right
I
trajectory
don't know
right
if this
now.
is a coaching thing or if it's a young player development thing, but they've had so many games where they've collapsed towards the end. They've let off their defensive intensity. They let off their focus, and they just blow these games. Even when Wemby was healthy. Like they have an overall across the season a minus 2.2 point differential, which is more in the ballpark of the Suns, who have minus 2.1. And the Suns,
I mean, that's kind of,
have won like 4 more games than them.
but that's kind of a thing that all the young teams in the NBA go through. I remember even when Westbrook and KD were together, they had already had some really bad seasons. And then when they finally broke through, it also started off as a really bad season. And then they just figured it out and they started winning games. And they just took off from there. Like, you don't get to just win right away in the NBA. The NBA is that weird league where you can't just all of a sudden, you can't skip any steps. It's kind of like how Denver kept losing. Like, oh man. But then once they got over that hump, they were able to do
Reggie
it.
Jackson.
But it's never like, yeah. And the same thing with OKC. I felt OKC was the best team last year, but you can't skip the experience. Like, for whatever reason, the NBA, like, something happens where you just have to like experience it before you can win.
Could also be the loss of Popovich and how he's not putting that pressure on them throughout
He's
the whole
not
game.
buying everyone really nice
'Cause he's not-
meals and wine.
I don't know about that part and its influence on how they play at the end of the games.
I think it's just no Wembanyama. I think you guys are reading too much into it. They lost like a freaking
No, but even
once-in-a-generation
before-
player.
But even before, how they weren't closing the games.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't think they would have been 3-7 after the All-Star break. Is that what you're saying the record is?
Well, I don't know what it is since y'all also break. They're 3-7 in their last 10, at least.
Yeah, that's like right after the All-Star break. Like I said, looking at their schedule right now, they probably win at least 3 more of those games. They definitely beat New Orleans twice. I think they would beat Sacramento. Probably still lose to OKC. They somehow beat Memphis though, and Detroit's pretty good. So I mean, they probably still lose to Detroit.
So essentially, like, we have to wait and see if Popovich is going to return, see when CP3 is going to retire. And once he retires, we have to see whether or not he's interested in coaching. And then we need to see if he's going to want to break in between his career and his coaching career as well.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
There are many coaches who were players for those Spurs teams.
Right.
You know, Avery Johnson, Ime Udoka. He was a bench guy on the Spurs for quite a while and then was on that bench as an assistant for a long time. And now he's doing great as head coach for the Rockets.
We're just going to ignore the fact that he had a very weird departure from Boston because of sexual issues.
It's like, do you ever know like what exactly the issues were?
I believe he was having
Yeah,
some
the
type
other-
of sexual relationship with one of the staff members on the Celtics.
The consensual one.
Yes.
I believe so. While he was engaged to Nia Long. So also didn't look good to be cheating on your fiance,
Yeah.
who you had a kid with.
I mean, if you want to also talk about former players that coach behind Popovich for that organization, they're doing well. There's Becky Hammond, too, from the San Antonio Silver Stars
Yeah.
to being a coach
That's
there
true.
to being a 2-time WNBA champion coach immediately.
Didn't she also get suspended for some other scandal?
Yeah, there was basically like
Did
some
she?
bullying or some not understanding of a player who needed maternity leave.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, she discriminated against a player for getting pregnant.
What? That doesn't sound good.
No. This is not part of the mailbag, but I just saw that Josh Allen just reached a $330 million deal with the Buffalo Bills.
Good for him.
There's been a lot of movement. Devontae Adams signed with the Rams. DK Metcalf got traded to the Steelers and got paid.
Very interesting. So can we talk about that
Oh,
Tucker Carlson
no.
video? Okay, what
Oh,
can we
yeah,
talk about
Tucker
then?
Carlson. Let's talk about that guy.
I didn't
Okay.
watch it. I don't care a single bit about what that guy has to say. He's a racist. He's a liar. He's a Russian pawn. His face looks like a stupid thumb. He looks like a
What?
thumb. He's got this weird face shape.
It's probably just the product of actually not following what Casey Means told him to do. He's not eating healthy enough. He's not exercising enough.
Can you tell us the title of this video?
Okay. So he's cut the video into multiple pieces as well with different titles. But the main title for the full video is Dr. Richard Bosshardt. Surgeons no longer need to be good. They just can't be white. I mean, with that title, does that sound like this is just going to be a video, a podcast about how the standards in medicine have been lowered and it's not a racist thing?
That sounds extremely racist.
Yeah, so I had this arguing with people today. It's always this gaslighting. Always like, oh no, you took it out of context. So the thing that was allegedly taken out of context was the part where he said, let me pull it up here. And so if I have a black female surgeon, my first assumption will be this person had to meet lower standards because the school or the certifying board was so anxious to say we have a black female surgeon. And of course, it's unfair to the individual, but then the whole system is unfair. Okay, so, they're like, you took this out of context. I'm like, I watched the whole video, so nice try. Secondly, that's also like a little abusiveness and gaslighting to say it in that way, the way Tucker Carlson said it, because you're like, well, I'm not being racist. It's actually unfair to the black female surgeon because DEI is making people have assumptions about her that aren't true. Like, yeah, no, that's...
So, but he's saying that's the first thing he would assume.
Exactly. But then he's saying, well, but that's unfair because the whole system is making me have that assumption.
What about the system makes you have that assumption? Surgical specialties for a long time and still continue to be some of the most competitive, rigorous specialties for medicine out of medical school. Not only that, their residencies by default are longer than most other kinds of doctors.
Yeah.
They require more training.
So all these people actually start to coalesce with each other. So I thought it was really funny how Charlie Kirk was trying to say that they're so intellectual and they're so diverse in their thoughts. Because this is very similar to what Elon Musk was saying a year ago in his Don Lemon interview. Oh, the lowered standards. Like, I don't want the lower standards to occur because, you know, some of these DEI people, they're getting in with lowered standards. And Don Lemon kept saying, that's not true. Like, that's not true that the standards are lowered once they get in. Like, they still have the same standards during the training process. Like, they don't have like a special score that's lowered in order to pass.
But you're saying that there are lowered standards for them to get entry?
So I guess what we could say is that underrepresented minorities do tend to get in with lower scores on average because we're trying to give these people the opportunity. They usually come from some type of disadvantaged background. And so you end up giving these people the opportunity, and a lot of times they succeed. And a lot of times they actually become some of the best doctors out there despite having a lower score and an average score.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's about whether or not you can do the job once you're in the room. Anyone can take a chance on you,
Right.
but if you waste that opportunity, you're out just the way that someone else would be out.
Yeah. I also thought it was interesting that at some point the surgeon started telling a story about some new attending surgeon that he worked with and how bad he was and how he couldn't even do simple surgical techniques. And so then Tucker Carlson basically said, well, was it because they're like a DEI person? And the guy said, no, it was actually like a cisgender straight man, a white man. So essentially they somehow were trying to blame minorities and women or DEI people for lowering the standards for the entire profession to the point where it was making white men worse at surgery.
That makes no sense.
It's kind of interesting though, like why does it have to be a female black surgeon? Why couldn't it just be a black surgeon? So it's obviously telling you that they're also against women.
Yes, they're like two hits, black and female. That's like the worst thing to them. But it reminds me of the J.D. Vance tweet that he had after that Washington, D.C. plane crash, where he said something along the lines of, well, you know, sometimes the DEI itself, like the DEI candidate themselves, doesn't actually cause the issue, but the DEI somehow affects the other people. So that's what it reminded me of. I don't know, like it stressed them in some way.
If it stresses them out, then they can't handle the job.
I'd have to find the tweet to see the exact words, but it was the same vibe of like somehow, if you can't directly blame the DEI candidate or the DEI surgeon, then somehow you still blame them in like this roundabout way, like somehow they made everything worse, even for white people. Just like how they're saying in this particular pod, the white people are having worse training because the standards were lowered for the DEI people.
But the training's is not different for anybody.
Well, but then, like I said, the argument started to become in this pod that the standards were lowered because of the DEI candidates. And as a result, everyone got worse.
So that in their perfect scenario, like the score on whatever exam you need to get in is the only thing that should be considered.
Well, I think that then it started to get into like a residency hour restriction argument, like the fact that now residents don't work as much as they used to. So a lot of it was also illogical. I'm like, wait, why are you now going into the fact that people are training for less hours and doing less cases? How is that being blamed on DEI? That's more of an issue with work-life balance, with mistakes happening when residents are too tired. And there was a particular case where a person died because of a resident being too tired. And that's what led to these changes.
It's still a lot of hours, even though this is better.
Well, and I think that some residencies may be getting longer because there is a concern about people not getting enough time, enough cases, because it looks like emergency medicine is going to go to 4 years. And they've been a mostly 3-year program up to this point. I also want to point out some things that I think make this surgeon a little not credible. So he stated that gender affirming surgery is like witchcraft.
What? How?
He just said like witchcraft. He said
It's
witchcraft.
science. Like there's like a very specific. There are very specific procedures you have to follow.
He said doing this whole thing, this process, the surgery, is a witchcraft kind of thing. He also stated, and this is a terrible framing, that the USMLE Step 1 went to pass-fail. And you know about that because your wife went through it. And he stated, and to pass it, you only have to be above the bottom 5% in the grades. If you are above the bottom 5%, you're going to pass. Okay, that is such a stupid way to frame it. They have a passing score, which actually over time, the passing scores have gotten higher. So the last iteration, the passing score was a 196. So they don't tell you your score, but in order to pass, you have to get a 196 or above a 196. So they're not looking at it in terms of, okay, you just have to beat the bottom 5% of people. They're not looking at it that way. They're looking at, you need to be at 196 or above. So that's a stupid way to say it. Because of the fact that 95% of people pass a test, that doesn't mean that you're having extremely low standards and you just have to beat 5% of people. That's like the stupidest thing I've ever heard, to think of it in that way. There's so many tests that have high passage rates, and you would never consider it in terms of that, like, oh, horrible standards, because you just have to be above the top, or just have to be above the bottom 5%.
But is it just like common sense that it's just like a profession where it's a lot of highly motivated, ambitious people that study?
Yeah.
And that's why you have such a high passing rate.
It's hard to get into medical school to begin with. And this is supposed to be a benchmark, a standardized test to make sure that you are learning what you need to know on the way to becoming a doctor. It is required. So if you fail, you have to retake it. And if you can't pass that, you're not going to be in medical school anymore. You're not going to be a doctor. So like you're telling me that you want more than 5% of people in medical school to not become doctors? That's not, you're not there to fail that exam.
Well, and also the schools are really good at selecting the right people as far as who they think is going to pass. Yeah, so they do a pretty good job, even for people that may have like a little bit lower GPAs or MCATs. They're not going to take super low GPAs and MCATs because they have to be sure, or they have to be reasonably sure, that people are going to pass their exams. Like the school also doesn't look good if they have all these people failing. And that happens in residency too. They also want to make sure that you're going to pass your exams because the residency is also evaluated based on how many people are passing their board exams.
And residency still requires a scored step 2. That is not only for the whatever pass-failed number that is, that's actually to see how competent you are at that clinical knowledge and reasoning. Yeah,
and the issue with step 1 and why it went pass-fail was that a lot of people were just like super stressed out about that test because it was so impactful in terms of what residency you could get into. And they decided that it wasn't really making sense, especially when step 1 is more basic sciences and not as clinical as step 2 and step 3. So that made medical student lives better, to not have to stress out so much and just try to focus on learning rather than just trying to like somehow get a 270 on step 1. And actually, apparently the passage rate has gotten a little bit lower. And they think that's because now that it's pass fail, some people aren't taking it as seriously. He has a lot of interesting thoughts. Also, there's still some physicians that still mask. It's just crazy. They're crazy, Tucker.
Are they crazy?
And then Tucker Carlson said, so if you're a doctor and you're openly mentally ill like that because you wear a mask, that's fucking ridiculous. Like, I still wear a mask, and you know why? Because I don't get sick anymore from work ever since I started wearing a mask all the time.
How often would you get sick from work before?
I can't say for sure, but I remember like it wasn't uncommon for me to get sick after a night shift because my immune system was so depressed. And if I had any like viral particles that I had been exposed to, then I would get sick. So now I don't get sick from work. I only get sick from my kid or people from Chicago that bring down their viruses.
You weren't going to mention that.
I mean, I could tell from your face that I needed to. So yeah, like stuff like that. Like this surgeon clearly is very right wing, and I think there's a bias there in terms of the way he's thinking.
Yeah, it's just crazy how that got so political, and it's still political now. It's a sign if you wear a mask that you're like a crazy liberal, or if you don't wear a mask. I know some like people, far left progressives, they're just like, oh my God, I can't believe you're not wearing a mask. Because of all of these concerns, it became this black and white thing for some people. And there's still a lot of people in Eastern and Southeast Asia where after the huge SARS epidemic that hit them, there were a lot of people who decided that they were still going to wear masks. And that was normal. And that was okay.
Yeah.
That was their own personal choice.
Yeah. I actually did enjoy wearing the masks because you could like pretty much hide your face wherever you went.
Why do you want to hide your face?
I also get to hide my face from the patients
But like, so if they say something stupid, you can't. They can't see you like laugh.
I mean, I don't think I laugh, but I think you can't see like really my facial expression in general. So that's great to me. I will say that I've never regretted wearing a mask, but I have regretted not wearing a mask. So both times were related to going on one of these residency trips because for this law school, I have to go to some in-person classes. So one of the times I didn't wear a mask, and then I came back home, and on the way back home, I started feeling sick, and it was COVID. And then this last residency that I did in the U.S., I also did one in London, but the one I did in the U.S., I went to D.C., and on the way back at the airport, there was a baby very close to me that had this like very wet-sounding cough, and I didn't have a mask on, and then I ended up getting sick too. I'm like, fuck. Like, you see, I should be wearing a mask in certain situations, like when I'm in an airport or in an airplane. I mean, it just makes sense. Like, you just have less downtime. And then it sucked for me that I got sick that week because I had a paper I had to write to finish out that class. And I was all sick all week while I was trying to write the paper.
Yeah, but did you level up your immune system? Did your immune system get stronger for having those illnesses?
I mean, I'm sure that I have antibodies to whatever viruses I've been exposed to. I mean, to COVID and also whatever virus that was last time. Mom thinks it was COVID because she ended up getting sick after me. And even though I had a negative COVID test, she tested positive for COVID. So it could have been that I had COVID both times that I didn't wear a mask.
Yeah.
During travel. But yeah, the mask thing is ridiculous to me. I think that people should do what they want. And at this point, obviously, we're not in a pandemic. So like we don't have to enforce masking or anything. But if people want to continue to wear masks, let them, and don't judge them. Like maybe, they don't want to be sick for a week when they have a paper to write. Or maybe they have asthma or COPD.
Well,
or
I will judge one specific subset.
Okay.
If you're driving around by yourself in your car, you do not need to wear a mask. And I still see people doing this.
Maybe it's because they were wearing their mask and they forgot to take it off when they were in the car.
No, because I've seen them multiple times.
Ooh, yeah, I just need to wear my mask.
Maybe they're like an Uber driver and they're about to pick someone up.
No, they're not an Uber driver.
But back to what I was saying, like maybe the person, like
All
we
I'm
don't
saying
know.
is if you wear a mask in your car by yourself, fuck you.
Okay. I'm going to start doing that.
Well, you should because
but
your
also we don't,
Tesla smells like ass.
It has like different smells. Like they change. Like it was smelling like vinegar yesterday.
Well, now I got to pay attention. Are they new Model S's wearing the mask?
Or any Tesla. any newer Tesla. But back to what I was saying, like, we don't know if this person maybe is immunosuppressed, or maybe they have a family member that they see regularly, whether it's a kid or like a grandparent or some older person in the family that's immunosuppressed in some way. And so maybe that's why they're wearing a mask, because they're just trying to prevent spreading something to like a family member. So
Wait, are we still talking about the car?
no, we're talking about the masks. Like, I just feel like it's a stupid topic as far as like politicizing it. Like, don't think that someone's mentally ill. Like, respect them. I mean, these supposed people that are all about freedom, they can't respect people that are wearing a mask because they just feel safer that way and they don't want to be sick or don't want to pass the sickness to someone else who's immunocompromised.
So you don't agree with this searching guy?
I mean, I disagree with a lot of things, and I also think it's BS to try to gaslight me and say that, oh, this wasn't a racist podcast.
Yep, it's the world we live in. We live in a society that it, yes,
Of
the
gaslighting
society
and
that is
abusiveness?
done. You know, as Mom always says, we're truly in the last days.
Terrible.
In the last days, in terms of what? Like, what's going to be the demise of the society? Like, what's going to be that one moment? Is it going to be Armageddon? Or is it going to be a nuke? Or is it just going to be some idiocracy bullshit?
It's already idiocracy. It's already happened.
Not until we start serving energy drinks to the crops and wonder why they don't grow.
Until Starbucks starts giving hand jobs.
I still think like we could have some hope if we have some Democrats who can message properly and get out there, center left Democrats. They're kind of like AOC, but not as progressive. I mean, I'm totally fine with progressivism.
Message properly though?
Who, me?
Anybody. I mean, as long as you're not on their side, you're liberal.
Crazy.
Trash.
I feel like
cringe.
there are some people that we could message properly to, but it requires a lot of directly talking and
Not calling them
face-to-face,
idiots.
door to door.
Not calling them idiots while they call you cringe.
You gotta be able to handle the heat.
I mean, sometimes people are just being idiots, though.
People can be idiots. That's true.
I mean, anybody could be an idiot in
Well,
certain
there are
situations.
some people that are changing. I was telling Ada that our trainer was saying that, and I was there when this was happening. Big time Trump supporter came in and he was very upset. He said that they're lying to everybody and like he's just done. He's like, he's just an egotistical maniac. I can't believe this. It's nothing but lies.
Yeah, and so we have to embrace those people and not say, oh, yeah,
there's a
we
lot of people
fucking
doing that
told you.
online.
We have to actually take a different approach. Like, okay, well, I mean, what can we do to make this better?
Yeah. Then I have a client that's a farmer and he was talking to somebody else. He wasn't talking directly to me, but he was also telling him like, he better not go through with these tariffs. Like we don't need them. Like, he's like, I need water from Mexico. I don't need tariffs.
Well, what's going to happen with that water treaty, though? Like, they keep on pressuring Mexico on that water treaty and nothing's happened.
Yeah, well, they really need it. I mean, the past couple of years, this guy said that's the biggest issue. I mean, they need to be able to have enough water for their crops.
Is there any way to tie the tariffs to the water treaty? Like, would that work? To say, hey, no tariffs if you give us the water.
I mean, you could, but Donald Trump doesn't care about that. He cares about
I don't know.
immigration
It
and
kind of
fentanyl.
seems like the administrations for both Canada and Mexico are willing to play hardball. That they don't want to roll over this time.
Well, I think that what he actually cares about is this little theory that he thinks the tariffs are going to make us money. That's what he's really trying to do. I don't think he cares about the fentanyl or all those other things. I think he's just trying to make money because he keeps on saying that we're going to get so rich from the tariffs and we're going to have the External Revenue Service collecting the money.
Which already exists.
Yeah.
I still think that it's not that. It's just like he's going to have to do the tariffs because we're not going to collect enough taxes. Not the corporate tax rate has gone so low. So he needs that money from somewhere.
But we're not going to make money with it. We're going to end up
Well,
getting
not us
retaliatory.
personally, but we're going to pay the taxes for the rich people.
Oh, I see. That doesn't sound good. Well, there's some hope then if less than 2 months in, people are already saying that he lied to them.
Well, I mean, he did run on. He's going to change everything immediately. Now he's backtracking.
I mean-
that Biden left it so terrible. So
I don't want to like
Don't
say
say
we
it.
told you so, but at the same time,
Don't say it.
we did try to inform people that it was not logical to believe that he could do that. I mean, it was like so ludicrous. Like, remember how he was going to end the Ukraine-Russia war in one day and even before he took office? And it's like a whole mess. Like, there's no way he can just stop it.
We just gotta start connecting with each other and trusting each other as people, as neighbors, as a community again. Keep on beating the same old drum. Those politicians, for the most part, they're not your friend. They barely represent you and what you want. Lobbyists are all over Washington, D.C. and every state legislature trying to make sure that enough money is spent so that corporate interests are upheld. They're not out there fighting for the little guy. They're out there, I don't know, trying to make sure that they can do whatever crypto shenanigans that they can to make them as much money as possible so they can develop their gigantic real estate contracts without any regulations so they can make more money and sell them to other corporations while still making housing not any more affordable.
I mean, Bernie Sanders, I don't think he's that type of guy.
I don't want to be an absolutist. There are exceptions. Not all politicians are crooked and evil.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need people who don't give a F, basically, as far as
like John
corporate interests
Fetterman
and
in
lobbyists
Pennsylvania, who went to the inauguration like he was going to the gym in like a hoodie and gym shorts.
Yeah. I think you have to have a mentality if you want to be a good congressperson that really does something for this country. I think your mentality needs to be, I'm going to do what's best for my constituents in the country. I'm going to make compromises. Corporate interests, lobbyists are never going to take priority. And if I don't get reelected, then too bad.
Yeah.
I got to do the right thing.
Well, there may be hope for us yet.
that's why I said term limits. Make it happen.
Yeah. I would vote for that.
You heard it here first. That's all the time that we have for today. So thanks for listening. Rate us 5 stars. We're getting a lot of good reviews on the platforms. Keep listening to us. We'll try to keep on sending over that Tejano connection to reality all over your favorite streaming platforms, whether it be iHeart, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have someone, I don't know, just like recite the transcript of this podcast to you, if that's a valid way to listen, I guess, give them a high five because you can't rate them 5 stars. That's what you will do there. Keep saying stuff in the mailbag. We still have some stuff in the mailbag that we would like to continue answering. We are getting messages and we do want to talk to you. We're also talking about the potential of having a live stream. So if you feel like you would like to participate in a live stream, let us know. We can have a chat, comment on the platforms. Let us know online if you would like to see that. And we'll see you around.
All right. Until next time.